And now, I'm very pleased to introduce tonight's speaker. I am not pleased to tell you that just in the last 2 weeks, multiple people were shot while simply driving on a highway in Kentucky. I am also not pleased to tell you about the terrible incident. I'm sure you've all heard about what happened in Georgia, where 4 were killed, 9 hospitalized, and 30 people were injured. In Chicago on Labor Day weekend, 50 were shot, and forgive me for not knowing the numbers, but it's between 5 and 7 people, I believe, were killed. Memorial Day was even worse in Chicago, 100 shot and 17 people killed. And the worst thing is, Chicago is less deadly than Baltimore and St. Louis. It's plain there's a growing trend of violence that reflects many in our nation are all id, as we would say in psychology, lacking normal inhibitions, impulse control, and morality. What is driving this? What happens when we're involved, and what do we need to navigate such a world? Most of us want to look away, but tonight we're going to hear from a man who, rather than turning from this ugliness, spends his time learning about what makes people so violent, what happens to those involved in these horrific events as victims and as heroes. Tonight's speaker has 5 patents to his name, 12 books, including his perennial bestseller on killing, with over 500,000 copies sold, and I believe it was translated into 8 languages, and a New York Times best-selling book co-authored with Glenn Beck. He is an Army Ranger, a paratrooper, a former West Point psychology professor. He has a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, which is something new to me. I think he might explain. And he's been inducted to the U.S. Martial Arts Hall of Fame. He's testified in front of Congress, the Senate, numerous state legislatures, served as an expert witness and consultant in state and federal courts. The colonel helped train mental health professionals after the Jonesboro massacre, and he was also involved in counseling and court cases in the aftermath of Paducah, Springfield, Littleton, and Nickel Mines Amish school massacres. Since his retirement from the U.S. Army in 1998, he's been traveling full-time as one of the nation's leading trainers for military law enforcement, mental health providers, school safety organizations. Today, Colonel Grossman is the director of Grossman on Truth. I was pleased to meet tonight's speaker at a conference this year, and I was impressed, but I must confess, I was unaware that I was meeting a legend. This man is loved, and you're about to find out why. I asked if he'd be interested in addressing the Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley. His response, "Put me in, coach." So I did. Please help me welcome Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman.
Jane. Thank you, Jane. Thank you. I don't know who that guy is Jane's talking about, but he needs to go get a life, yeah? Hey, I'm Dave, and I usually start my presentations with the Pledge of Allegiance. And then I ask, what were the last 3 words you just said? Last 3 words of the pledge, anybody? Justice for all. Justice for all. You know, for a lot of people, those are 3 words we mumbled as kids every morning. For us, it is our solemn, sacred obligation. Justice for all. And I submit to you, the ultimate injustice is to have your life stolen away, or to have your child's life stolen away. So this whole business first touched my life in March of 1998. I retired from the Army after 24 years at a little place called Jonesboro, Arkansas. I got a call from my aunt in Florida. She said, "Dear Lord, is that Joe's school?" They talked about Joe, my baby, my little one, was in middle school in Jonesboro, Arkansas that day. I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Turn on the news." There it was on every channel. Mass murder in the middle school in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Unknown dead. Fleets of ambulances being sent to my son's school. I was gut struck. I was paralyzed. My wife said, "You need to go out there." I said, "What can I do?" She said, "You're a West Point psych professor. You're an Army Ranger. You wrote the book on killing. They need you. Go." I said, yeah, you're right. Find every good man, there's always a better woman, yeah? I'm bride of 49 years, my high school sweetheart, she's a good woman. With my heart in my throat, and what was in the all-time record juvenile mass murder in human history, Now, a year later, Columbine beat that record. But on the day of the all-time record juvenile mass murder in human history, I went out to my son's school. And tell you at the end of this hour how it all turned out. Can you take my word for it? We don't want to go back there no more. To have your children's life stolen away from you. And so what I want to do is lay a bit of a foundation on my background on all of this. My first book is on killing, translated in 8 languages now. Marine Corps Commandant's required reading list. Over 500,000 copies sold in English. And I coined the term killology. Now, criminology is not about teaching people to be criminals. Killology is not a how-to book. On killing, it's about the factors that enable and restrain killing in our society. We found out in World War II, most of the troops wouldn't pull the trigger. It was a training flaw. Taught them to shoot bullseye targets. We have no known case of any bullseyes ever attacking our troops. If you've been in the U.S. Armed Forces since the Korean War, you never once shot a bullseye. Man-shaped silhouette, pop you field of view, hit the target, target drop. Stimulus response, like a pilot in a flight simulator, like a kid in a fire drill. Modern training to adults with discipline makes killing a conditioned response. And oh, by the way, the video games are doing the exact same thing to our kids. Folks, 2 years before Jonesboro, 3 years before Columbine, this book came out, I predicted a generation of mass murders like nothing we've ever seen before. We have never seen children committing mass murders in their schools in human history. And then there was one in Canada, and then one in San Diego, both in the 80s. In the 90s, it began to explode. So all of this, here, people point to some terrible crime. They say, oh, that proves that mankind's a killer. Well, maybe, but it's an outlier. It's 1 in a million, that terrible crime. We're a nation of 1/3 of a billion people. That one terrible crime you heard about today, it's 1 in 1/3 of a billion. So you explain to me that 99.999999% of our citizens who didn't kill anybody today. Explain that. Divorce, infidelity, layoff, traffic accidents. In a lifetime of provocation, less than 1 in 1,000 people will even seriously attempt to take a life. Explain that. It's this whole array of physiological, psychological, social factors that restrain violence. We know how to turn them on, and we know how to turn them off. And they've been turned off, and we're paying a tragic, tragic price. And I want you to understand just how desperately bad it is. The games are just part of the equation. Somebody say, oh, I played those games, I'm not a killer. Well, I was a kid, I never buckled my seatbelt. I was just fine. Nobody buckled up, they're all just fine. But if you're a cop, and I'm a reserve cop, you scrape a few kids off the highway, you become a believer in seatbelt laws, yeah? The odds your kid's going to die are minute, but what a stupid risk to take, you understand? Not every kid who died, well, not every kid had a seatbelt unbuckled, but most of the ones that died had the seatbelt unbuckled. Not every kid that played these games become killers, but all the killers played these games. This is the new factor in the equation, and that's what's in my book on killing. Now, the follow-on, in most ways, the one I commend to your attention first and foremost, is my book on combat. On combat, in May, I spent a week in Ukraine training their military from one end to the other of their nation. Ukraine, a nation in the 3rd year of a terrible war. They got more loss of life than all of Vietnam. 20 years of Vietnam, but they lost far more than that already. More loss of life than Korea. As a ratio of the citizens in their nation, Ukraine's already lost more people than we lost in World War II by far. And they're still driving on out there. And this book was selected, it was translated Ukrainian. It was the Book of the Year award in Ukraine. I trained the military from one end to the other, and I tell you, they will tell you how quickly peace and prosperity can disappear. And death and chaos and war can be right around the corner. And I want you to recognize, things are going to get violent during the election. Things are already violent at levels never seen before. Just stay with me, and I think it's terribly important for us to know. So on combat, and we introduced the whole idea of the sheep, the wolf, and the sheepdog. I got the U.S. government trademark for the term sheepdog as protector. And so we wrote the Sheepdog Kids book, and it's really pretty deep, and it's got the sheep, the wolf, and the sheepdog essay in it. I'd speak at the NRA every year, and they said, well, Dave, we need more than that. Well, we need the next step. And so we wrote the book, Why Mommy Carries a Gun. Yeah. Now, dang it, if we're going to carry a gun, let's do it right. Teach the kids what they need to know. Find a gun, stop, don't touch. 4 universal gun safety laws, Second Amendment, famous sheepdogs throughout history. It's a pretty important book. And then we rolled into this. Folks, the single best way to prepare for combat. Bad things are coming. You want to prepare yourself? And in a lifetime of study, I tell you, the single best way to prepare for combat is hunting. You know, hunt, go with your friends to do, see what it's about. And I wrote the book on hunting. You cannot understand who we are, cannot understand killing, cannot understand combat until you understand hunting. And then we'll touch very, very briefly on my book on spiritual combat. And we'll touch base on that. So that's me, that's the background. And I want to start with the pop quiz. Oh no, I said there'd be questions. How many kids killed by school fire in all of America the last 50 years? Total kids killed, school fire, America, 50 years. Anybody? 0. Not one single kid has been killed by school fire in an American school since the 1950s. How many killed by violence? Thousands. Now, folks, it's funny you'd ask. I got some good data for you here. And before I leave the pledge, let me dive in. Folks, the pledge, there is a biological need in every human being to be part of a larger group. One person alone in the jungle is cat food. 10 people with spears are the alpha predator anywhere on the planet. And so when we say the pledge, we're saying this is our group. When we stand for the national anthem, we say this is our group. This is who we turn to. But if athletes dishonor the flag, you dishonor the anthem. If it's not cool to be patriotic, then who will fill that gap? The gangs will fill that gap in a blink of an eye. And the gangs are the nation, and the nation has ordered them to kill. And that's scary, because when your nation tells you to kill people, you do. Gang crime and gang membership has exploded. And every athlete who takes a knee during the anthem is a recruiter for gangbanging killers. That's just one angle of the equation coming unglued. The factors that hold us together and the factors that can tear us apart. And that's just one piece of the equation. So folks, how many kids killed by school violence? Well, we got some pretty good data. It's a federal report, and it talks about the number of school shootings. Now stop there. Shooting is an Olympic sport. Shooting is our constitutionally protected right. When did shooting become a word for a criminal act? I want you to walk out that door and never again call one of these things a shooting. It's anti-gun propaganda coming out of your mouth. And the Columbine shooting, the Virginia Tech shooter. Look, folks, shooting's an Olympic sport. It's our constitutionally protected right. You're all active shooters. Most of y'all, right? You're active shooters. Hey, active shooter response. We'd be real busy during deer season. Yeah. You got to understand what they've already done to us. The only thing you control is the words coming out of your mouth. And every time you use that word shooter for a mass murderer, every time you use the word shooting, when did we stop saying massacre and mass murder and multiple homicide? And that's part of the whole sickness in the equation. It's how they brainwash us into not even calling these crimes what they are, murders and massacres and mass murders committed by children. So over here is Jonesboro and Columbine, and we brought it down, and then it went up. Now the dark green are incidents, the number of incidents with loss of life. A lot of them just solo homicides, every one of them precious. Light green are incidents we know of with injuries. And it went up, and then we did more. And folks, today the Columbine killers would have been caught 3 times over. We're really good at spotting those kids. Let's stop right there. How many kids killed by school fire? Too stinking many. So y'all help me assign a grade. Everybody put your teacher hat on. What kind of grade do we give the firefighter for keeping a kid safe from fire? Come on, what's a fire grade? Reluctantly. Even the cops give the firefighter an A. You don't understand cops and firefighters, yeah? Dang firefighters, they sleep till they're hungry, eat till they're tired, repeat as necessary. They walk in the door and get an A. You know what really bugs cops is firefighters are paid to sleep, yeah? Yeah. Only firefighters and prostitutes make money in bed, yeah? You know, we're teasing here. All right, so what's our grade for violence? What's a violence grade? No one gets an F anymore. How about needs improvement? We said, Johnny, why can't you be like little Jimmy firefighter? Little Jimmy firefighter, he's our A student, and the answer is very important. Denial. Stinking denial. Now let's go back to what's happening. In spite of everything we've done, folks, the Uvalde, Texas school massacre was a perfect storm where everybody did the wrong thing. There are so stinking many of those kids out there trying to commit these crimes. The schools will tell you, you never hear about the one we stop. There's just so stinking many of these kids trying to commit these crimes that they slip through the cracks. Uvalde, exterior door unlocked, interior door unlocked. Cop that didn't make a shot, cops that didn't go in. Everybody did the wrong thing. And there's just so many kids out there. So what did Texas do? Oh, we need gun laws. Baloney. Here's what Texas did. They passed a law. Every door in every school will be shut and locked all the time. Now, how much did that cost? How hard was that? 25 years of school massacres. And finally, we got a law like that. You know why no kid's been killed by school fire in half a century? The law, the fire code. Half the cost of this building went into fire code. The most expensive thing in this building is a fire sprinkler system under pressure for the lifetime of the building. Second most expensive, the electrical system, brought up the fire code, doubled the system to run every fire exit, every fire alarm, fireproof material for the structure versus cheapest alternative. Half the cost of building goes into fire code. What did we do to protect kids from violence? Oh, we'll put a sign out front that says, no guns allowed. Bam! We understand why that is. Folks, make them lock the door and they're safe for a day. Make it the law and they're safe from now on. Number one, keep the doors locked. It's the law, and we do it. My mom never buckled those kids up. It became the law. We start buckling the kids up, you understand? But folks, number two, laminate film. Any glass on the door beside there. Don't no good to lock the door and they shoot out the glass, reach in and open the door. And in the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre, that your doors are locked, we buzz people in, your kids are safe, it was glass. He shot out the glass, opened the door, walked in and murdered 26 people, 2 classrooms of first graders slaughtered, and a couple $100 of laminate film on the front door. They'd all be alive today. This is not rocket science. We can do this. Now, I'll tell you why they're in denial. I want you to understand this. The third thing Texas said is there will be somebody in every school that can shoot back. Now, there have only been 3 cases where a multiple homicide happened in a school when there was somebody present in that building that could shoot back. Now, the 3 cases were one in Texas, one at Oxford, Michigan, this most recent one in Georgia. In all 3 cases, the minute the cop got there, not another kid died. Statistically speaking, one of the best things we could do is put a trained individual that got in the school. So just understand, this is not rocket science, but I need you to understand why they're in such denial. All right, let's go on here. Here we go. And there we are in the 2021 graduating year. Half the year they didn't go to school. They still set a new record, dead by violence in our schools. Oh, how can this be happening? And they won't do anything about it. Oh, we need more gun laws. How are those laws working out for Mexico? No, it's more complex than that, but you'll understand why. They have this blood on their hands, and they have to point the finger somewhere else. All right, so just understand that it's through the roof. This is not rocket science. But the reason why they're in denial, and here's the first critical point of the day. I'm a West Point psychology professor, an Army Ranger, and interpersonal human aggression, violent crime, It's the single most psychologically toxic and corrosive thing any human being will ever face. And you tell me, is there a difference between these two scenarios? Scenario one, tornado hits your house while you're gone, put your family in the hospital. Tornado, family in the hospital. How do you feel about that one? Thank God they're alive. Scenario two, criminals break into the house while you're gone and beat your family in the hospital instead. Now you feel any different? There's all the difference in the world. Do you understand? One's a random act of nature. The other's an intentional malignant act by a human being. The DSM, the Bible of psychology, talking about PTSD, it says whenever the cause of your trauma is human in nature, the degree of trauma is usually more severe and long-lasting. On 9/11, terrorists murdered 3,000 of our citizens. The stock market crash, our way of life changed, we invaded 2 nations. That same year, 30,000 people died in traffic accidents. They didn't take nothing. They were accidents, you understand? I want you to wrap your mind around. You know why they're in denial? Because it's just too hard to embrace the fact that there are people out there so stinking evil, they go hunt down your children and slaughter them. They sink back into denial. And that's the problem. That's the problem. And so the goal is to hunt down every stinking bit of denial, chew it up and spit it out, and understand just how desperately bad the situation is. By the way, you come up afterwards, put dibs on these, I'll sign them for you. They become kind of collectibles. They went up for charity auctions 3 different times. It's a charity auction, right? Every time it made more than $200. Not even dead yet, my art's worth money. For you, it's free, huh? All right, now. All right, so number 1, interpersonal human aggression is the most psychologically toxic, corrosive thing that can happen to any person or any civilization. And we'll build more on that. Number 2, it's much, much worse than it looks. We measure the problem with the murder rate, right? The murder rate is being held down by medical technology. The number of dead people is a lie because medical technology is saving everyone. You get it in one sentence. You get it. Nobody can deny it. Folks, what if I told you your grandpa made 25 cents an hour? This job pays $25 an hour. You're 100 times better off your grandpa. That's your baloney meter going off. But when it comes to murders, oh, well, the murder rate's up, but it's not quite as bad as the 1960s. We know you can't talk about money without allowing for inflation, and you cannot talk about violence without allowing for medical technology. And the truth, it is worse. It is much, much worse. Now, we got one good data point out there. We got one good data point, UMass Harvard study, peer-reviewed journal, between the 1960s and the 1990s, medical technology cut the murder rate to 1/3 or 1/4 would otherwise be. That is to compare the murders in the 60s to the 90s. You got to multiply the 90s by a factor of 4 or 3, and the leaps and bounds of life-saving technology in the 1990s is through the roof. Tourniquets alone have cut the murder in half in just the last decade. Somebody slaps on a tourniquet, saves a crime victim's life, you prevented a murder. And tourniquets alone have cut the murder rate in half in the last 15 years. Lessons learned in the war. You understand? We're being lied to. It's much, much worse than it looks. So with that understanding, let's take a look at what's going on in recent years with violence in America. Now, this is from the Uniform Crime Report. Look it up yourself. And here we are in 2006 with 17,000 Americans murdered. 2008, 16,000. 2009, 15,000. 2010, 14,000. That's the way it ought to be. Medical technology, police technology steadily getting ahead. And it levels out, and then, boom. In 2015, 2016, it exploded like nothing we have ever seen before. Now, what was happening in 15, 16? Yeah, the FBI guys that put this. Folks, I train cops in all 50 states. I train all the feds. And the FBI guys, they call this the Ferguson effect. Remember the Ferguson riots? Remember that whole sick, twisted narrative? The cops are evil, and they're gunning down innocent people, and the criminals are the good guys. You got to wrap your mind around this narrative and how harmful it is. This media coverage that the cops are evil, out of control, slaughtering innocent people. I'll tell you how many people they murdered with that narrative. I'll tell you how many Americans are dead. 1,722 dead Americans. The following year, that many, plus 1,367. Next year, it stayed there. You got to understand this. It is their religion. This socialism, Marxism is their religion. And they believe the world divides into two parts, the aggressor and the victim. And the aggressor is always evil. And the aggressor needs to be hunted down and killed. And the victim, they can do whatever they want to because they're the good guys, you understand? And their narrative says that the cops are the aggressors and the criminals are the victims. And that is the most twisted, destructive, possible narrative any civilization could embrace. The crime is good, and crime and the cops are bad, and that's their narrative. But let me show you, it didn't stop there. By the way, right about here, I trained the American Sheriff's Association. Had 400 sheriffs in my audience. I said, Sheriff, how many of y'all knew this? Not one. This stock market, we hear about it every day. Most interest rates or inflation rates, we hear about it once a week. How can this be happening and not even be in the news? We see it points a finger right back at them. This is the Ferguson effect. And it points a finger right back at them, and so they simply censor it. However bad you think the media is, you're wrong. It's worse. But folks, let's zoom out and look at the big picture now. This is right out of the New York Times. New York Times. There is no precedent for what happened in 2020. Then why did they bury it in a Sunday supplement and never mention it again? All right, this is year-over-year increase, decrease in homicides. In the 1960s, up this much, boop, 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 they all stack on top of each other. Look, folks, here's the concept. Hollywood, movies, television industry, right up to the early 1960s, operated by a code. And the code said, we know the stories we tell have an impact on our society. And we know we have a responsibility to tell stories that have a positive impact. And a lot of the code could be said in 3 words. Crime doesn't pay. Criminals must not be depicted in a positive manner. Law enforcement must not be depicted in a negative manner. They knew a civilization could not survive. We taught our children that law is evil and criminal is good. You understand? Nobody can survive that when we teach that to our children. And then in the early 1960s, they threw the code away. We had no responsibility for the stories we tell your children. A 30-second commercial is worth vast amounts of money. But year after year after year is sick stuff fed to your children has no impact. That's their lie, and they're sticking with it. But the blood is on their hands. And we'll keep on tracking that dynamic. Now, folks, right up until we're 6, 7, 8 years old, children have enormous difficulty telling the difference between dreams and real life and television and movies. It's all real. Look, you ever had trouble telling dreams from real life sometimes, yeah? I walked into our local hardware store, and I thought, ooh, they changed the shelves around. Now, I had a dream they did it, and they didn't do it. But I didn't realize until I walked in, it was a dream. Do you understand? With kids, it's like that all the time. So when children see something terrible and brutal and awful, it's real. And maybe one of the most evil movies ever made is Denzel Washington in Training Day. The most beloved black actor plays a corrupt, violent cop. And they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, and they see that, and it is real. Denzel's a bad cop. They're all bad. They're all evil. How could any sane, rational person believe in defund the police? Here's their agenda. Empty all the prisons. Everybody in prison is a victim, and they're being oppressed. And we got the oppressor and the oppressed, right? So they empty all the prisons. Name me one movie in 20 years where the guy in prison wasn't the good guy, where the death penalty was deserved, right? And empty all the prisons, get rid of all the cops. What would it be like? Don't you remember the movie The Purge? They turned off the murder law for one day. The Purge didn't empty all the prisons. The Purge didn't turn off all laws. The Purge was just the murder law. Folks, it would be orders of magnitude worse than The Purge. and we would never put the pieces back together again. We can go a day without food. We go a day without water. One day without justice. Empty all the prisons, turn off all the cops. And we'd never put the pieces back together again. And this sick, twisted narrative is kicking our tail and destroying our civilization. All right, so go back now to the 1960s, up, up, up. Oh, it went down for a year, then up, up, up. Oh, it went down a couple of years. But if we allow for medical technology, it ain't down all that much at all. Then up, up, up. Look at the 1990s. Look at the 1990s. Down, 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 down. But if we allow for medical technology, it ain't down at all. It's just not up quite so much. And then we get up, down, yeah. And there's there is the Ferguson effect. See those 2 years? Yeah, that's the Ferguson effect. Unequal, the worst we've ever seen. Allow for medical technology, there's nothing like it. And there is 2020. The New York Times. There is no precedent for what happened. Then why did they bury it and never mention it again? Well, this is the George Floyd effect. This is the Minneapolis effect. It started in May of 2020. Homicides have exploded like nothing we've ever seen before. Do your own research. Dig out the Uniform Crime Report. Look at the numbers. It's there. Now, why in the world is this not headline news? Why did they bury it and never mention it again? Because it points a finger right back at them. There's twisted narrative. The cops are evil and the criminals are the good guys. So, folks, here's another Pew report. They did a nice job. Here's a Pew report. The murder rate arose by nearly a third in 2020. Now, this is 9/11. The other one didn't report. The number of murders are so small that 3,000 in 9/11 kicked it way out of whack. And then it went back down the next year. Oh, isn't that a surprise? But this is even worse than 9/11. In 1 year, just the raw data is the worst we've ever seen. When you allow for medical technology, it's orders of magnitude worse. Folks, will violence come out after the election? It's already there. We're already at levels of violence never seen. We've never seen anything remotely like this. It's already there. And yeah, I think the elections, whoever wins will kick it off to new levels of violence. We have never been in a nation. Our nation never come close to this level of violence. And the twisted, sick part of it, nobody knows. They've censored it. And the data's there. And folks, here it is, right? We knew it was going to happen. Here it is. The murder rate is up, but it's still below historical highs. Yeah, that ain't so bad, right? But if we allow for medical technology, it really looks something like that. So Heather McDonald, a smart lady at the Manhattan Institute, she really nailed it. She said 2020's violent crime increase, call it Ferguson 2.0, Minneapolis effect, has come on with the speed and magnitude that make Ferguson 1.0 seem tranquil. Heather McDonald said George Floyd's death at the hands of Minneapolis police in late May was justly condemned. But the event has now spurred an outpouring of contempt against the pillars of law and order that has no precedent. Those words again. Yeah, this is right off of Fox. It was up for a day and then poof, it went away. Never mentioned it. It has no precedent in American history. The wheels have come off the bus, folks. And oh, by the way, violence against law enforcement is unlike anything we've ever seen before. Folks, a friend of mine, Dr. Joanne Cantor, wrote a book called Mommy, I'm Scared. Quite a while back, she asked her college students to write about the scariest thing that ever happened to them. And over again, they talked about the movie Jaws. A generation was traumatized by Jaws. And today, sharks are an endangered species. Who wouldn't want to go kill Jaws and put them up on the wall, yeah? A generation was taught to hate and fear sharks. Today, sharks are an endangered species. A generation was taught to hate and fear cops. And today, we have an all-time record number of cops murdered in the line of duty. I want you to understand what's going on here. FBI director tells us violence as cop is far worse than overall violence in society. Here's the number of cops murdered in America. Now, this is kind of important. Those who were killed by vehicle assault, by knives, by guns. That 2021 was the all-time record number of cops murdered in the line of duty. But why did it go down the next year? Cops nationwide tell me we know how to not get assassinated. We just don't go to that part of town no more. And that part of town no longer has justice. What's that oath we swore? Justice for the people who live on the right side of the town? Justice for people that can't afford to pay for security? No, we swore an oath to justice for all. And the social contract is broken down. You've all heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the foundation of every civilization. We're safe and secure and not of danger, and it's true. The foundation of the building crumbles. What of the building? The building falls. And folks, I call it the social contract. Here's the deal. Here's the contract. You obey the law, you pay your taxes, and we'll help keep you safe. Ain't that the deal? The Pharaoh, the Romans, us, obey your law, pay your taxes, we'll help keep you safe. If we can't keep them safe, why would they pay your stinking taxes? Why would they obey your laws? If we can't do the fundamental part of our job of keeping them safe. So folks, last year, we had an all-time record number of cops shot in the line of duty. All-time record number of cops now, body armor and medical technology saving lives. Wait, shouldn't this be headline news? Daily headline news, all-time record number of cops shot in the line of duty. It just gets buried. Look it up, you'll find it. But it's not making the headlines, they don't talk about it. And you know what they heard? They said, look, we don't want warrior cops out there. No, we don't want warriors, we need guardians. And we don't want sheepdogs, we want these guardians, right? So they did that. They sucked the warrior spirit out. You recognize this guy? Yeah. This is the deputy in the Parkland school massacre that didn't go in. People told him, we don't want warriors that charge into guns. It's not your job. And so he did what he was told to do. He sat outside and guarded the door while children died. Here's another couple of folks you might recognize. Now, this is the police chief and the school resource officer at Uvalde with over a dozen felony offenses for the police chief who didn't go in and the SRO that didn't go in. Well, you told us we shouldn't be warriors. Warriors are evil. We don't want the warrior spirit. And then you suck the warrior spirit out of them. They don't go in to save your kids. Well, where did that come from? This attack on our cops is more than just killing them. It's more than just the recruiting down and retention down. It's about sucking the very spirit out of their hearts and then attacking them when they don't go in and wondering what happens. Now, folks, this is important. We have two crime reports in America. One is the Uniform Crime Report, UCR, what cops report to police. Remember, there's whole parts of our civilization that ain't reporting crime no more. They don't, the cops don't go there, they don't report crime. But the whole parts that aren't reporting it. But here's what we got now. Number one is Uniform Crime Report. Number two is the Crime Victim Survey. Now, between 2021 and 2022, UCR says violent crime is down 2%. Survey says up 75%. You see, every year, they randomly contact thousands and thousands of people. Were you a victim of rape? Were you a victim of robbery? Were you assaulted? And they collect that data. We got what the cops report and what the survey says. And there has never been such a disparity between the two reports. Now, homicide. Funny thing, folks. Decade after decade, they called thousands of people, and never once somebody said, yep, I was a victim of homicide. Never once. Homicide victims can't speak for themselves. We have to speak for them, do you understand? And people don't even know they're being murdered. People don't even know what's happening. And we got to speak for the dead. And our civilization has just shut them away and said it didn't really happen. But here's the rape. Rape down 6%. Survey says up 58%. Robbery. It went up 1%. No, survey says up 47%. And ag assault. Now, folks, aggravated assault is an attempted murder where medical technology stopped them. Do you understand? One of the best measures we got out there is the ag assault rate. Ag assault down 2%, survey says, up 104%. This is the greatest disparity between the two reports that we have ever seen. How many of y'all saw this? Look online, you'll find it. Why isn't that the news? Why don't we know about that? Because it points the finger right back at them. I got a couple of books I commend your attention. Heather McDonald wrote the book, A War on Cops. That's what it is, a flat-out war on law and order. It's a war on cops. Whose side are you on? Are you sold out to that left-wing agenda that the criminals are all oppressed and the cops are the oppressors? Whose side are you on? Yeah, cops got to be held accountable. They got to be held to a high standard. And let's not lower the standards, dang it. But this is insane. It is truly a war on cops. But it's even worse. A friend of mine wrote a book. I wrote the foreword to it. Blue Lies, the War on Justice. That's what it is. And the conspiracy to weaken America's cops. Now, folks, it's got page after page of footnotes and endnotes and references for all the stuff I'm telling you here. I wrote the foreword to it. And I commend this book to your attention. It is a war on justice. It is a war on our nation and our way of life. So let me ask you a question now. I train my cops nationwide. Why does anybody going to be a cop in this day and age? Why would any rational, sane person do this job? Every single thing they do is caught on camera. The attacks on law enforcement. Why would anybody do this job? What happens if nobody wants to be a cop? Yeah? Well, all I can tell you is why I'm still in the fight. I'm 68 years old. I retired from the Army a little over 26 years ago. Been on the road ever since, a couple hundred days a year. I believe I'm the only person ever to be post-certified in all 50 states, trained every federal agency, many school districts, and academic presentations, on and on. And folks, waiting at home for me is my bride of 49 years, my high school sweetheart. 49 years. She was 15. I was 17 when I proposed to her. We are from Arkansas. Yeah. 2 years later, she married a crazy Army paratrooper. Been this ride with me for 49 years. I love her more than life itself. But I get home 1 or 2 nights a week, conjugal visit, clean underwear, back on the road. See, the only people on earth more precious than my bride are children, our grandchildren. I have a grandson in the Army now going to his first deployment. In the blink of an eye, we'll be great-grandparents. And we believe if we love our children, if we love our nation, if we love our God, or we love our way of life, the worse it gets, harder we fight. Do you understand? That's what love means. Let me ask you a question, folks. What is the opposite of evil? As light defeats darkness, what defeats evil? And you know what makes a great cop? You know what makes a great cop? Empathy. Empathy is love with the shoes on. What if my family trapped in that burning building? What if my child had been murdered? What if my spouse had been assaulted? And I submit to you, the opposite of evil is love. Evil is absence of love, just as darkness is absence of light. How do you fight evil? With love. Love for our children, love for our family, love for our God, love for our nation. That's why we stay in the fight, do you understand? And love means the worse it gets, the harder we fight. Any country western fans out there? Old Kenny Rogers song. You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille. Remember that one? You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille. 4 hungry children and a crop in the field. I've had some bad times, I've had some sad times. This time the hurting won't heal. You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille. That song tears your heart out. The idea of a mother abandoning 4 hungry children? No, that's not what love means. Love means the worse it gets, the harder you fight. And here with all my heart. If we love our nation, if we love our God, if we love our children, if we love our way of life, it's time to fight. You don't really know what somebody's made of until the bullets fly over their head and they've been winged and your blood is flowing. The majority of human beings will curl up in a little ball when the first bullet hits. You understand? And President Trump, former President Trump, was hit and bleeding. He didn't know if he was dying. He had no idea. But his last words were fight, fight, fight. If he was dying, that's the last words he wants out of his heart. And you want to know whether or not somebody has truly got the guts to drive on? Who could take a bullet and drive on where it is? And so, folks, you can act happy, not really be happy. You can act sad, not really be sad. But if you act brave, you are brave. And our future president is a very brave man, do you understand? And so I just tell you, oh, thank you. And I tell you something else here. I tell all my first responders. I train our nation's largest fire department and first responders and it is the cop's job, the first responder's job, to go to the very worst thing that happens every day. Look at your city, pick the most terrible, tragic thing that happened, and it's their job to go there. And you can't help but ask the question. It's not about faith. It's really an existential question. How could a loving God allow these terrible things to happen? And the answer is very simple. We are not God's puppets. A loving Father would not hang over your shoulder every minute of every day, protecting you from every bad thing. He is there. He does answer prayer. But in the end, we're all going to die. You ever heard if you love something, let it go. If it comes back, it's truly yours? That's how much God loves us. He loves us enough to let us make our own decisions. And that means a lot of people make bad decisions. A lot of bad things happen. He said, God, why don't you do something? He said, I did. I sent you for just such a time as this. Do you understand? And fight with all your heart and all your might. Fight for what you love. Fight for your children. Fight for your family. Fight for your nation. Fight for a way of life that's under attack. Fight against the people who won't even print the news. And remember every single one of those lives that have been snuffed out. And let me show you very quickly what's going on. By the way, folks, last year, attacks on churches just flat doubled. A doubling of attacks on churches in 1 year. That's outrageous, and it's just exploding. And there's, I want you to wrap your mind around it. There's not some evil new gun out there. Oh, what about those high-capacity, semi-automatic military weapons? Nobody needs one of them. What, like an M1 carbine? 7 million of these were manufactured in World War II. After World War II, they flooded the market. Folks, up until 1968, any kid at any age could order one through the U.S. mail, and your mailman would deliver it to your door. Now, we're good with changing that law. And we're good with what we got in place now. But the guns didn't change, folks. That's the question they don't want you to ask. Think like a scientist. Think like a detective. What changed? And so much of what I got to tell you here is in my book, Assassination Generation. I was invited to the White House as part of President Trump's roundtable on violent video games. They asked me the day before, you go to the White House? The NRA? Yeah, no problem. This is all I had. I went to the White House dressed like this. A gracious, impressive man in person. Back to the White House to brief the vice president both times. Had a chance to put one book in their hand. This is the book. And all the things I'm telling you about is in here. And folks, there's not some evil new gun out there. That's their big lie, because they've got to point the finger somewhere away from them. You got to understand their narrative. The whole anti-gun thing is them desperately pointing the finger somewhere else. It's evil cops, it's evil guns. No, it's them. It's them. And very quickly, I want you to understand. I co-authored a book with Glenn Beck. New York Times bestseller. New York Times bestseller. The best book ever done on gun control. Great guy in person, Glenn Beck. Really a great guy. I think I wrote more of the book than he did. He gets his name on the front. That's how it works. But the first two thirds of the book say the guns have always been there. We're doing a better job than ever at keeping guns out of the hands of kids. The last third of the book say if the guns aren't new, what's new? It's a home run hit. The sick movies and the sick TV shows and the sick video games being fed to children. This is the new factor, and they will not point the finger back at themselves. It's all about money. It's a universal conspiracy of greed and stupidity and short-sightedness and self-interest. It's all about them making money and continuing to sell this garbage. Then, folks, what I need you to understand is, and here's your kid's brain. Here's your kid's brain on video games. End of discussion. Violent visual imagery inflicted upon children. And your body goes into fight or float mode. What you're looking at His fight-or-flight hormones flooding through this kid's brain. And the violence puts him in fight-or-flight mode. It's real. The body treats it like it's real. So in 2005, the state of California overwhelmingly voted to regulate children's access to violent video games. How many of y'all remember that? 2005, state of California overwhelmingly voted. It's in my book. To regulate children's access to violent video games. Silicon Valley said, we're good with this. Hollywood said, we're good with this. Arnold Schwarzenegger signed the law. And the video game industry fought all the way to the Supreme Court. They said, we have a constitutional First Amendment right to sell any game to any child at any age. You cannot stop us. You cannot regulate us in any way, shape, or form. And they lied and they deceived. And it's all in the book. And they conned 7 old men, never played Pong in their life. 7 Supreme Court justices overturned the California law. But read the dissenting opinions. They're powerful and they're important. But they want to shove it down the memory hole. The data in 2005 was so overwhelming, the state of California overwhelmingly voted to regulate children's access to this stuff. But there's something else going on. I commend your attention. I had the honor to write the foreword to a book called Mass Killers by Mike Rock, a Secret Service agent. He asked me to write the foreword. I said, Mike, you got me by just not calling them shooters. We use that word killers and massacres and homicides. But he's analyzed all these mass killers. And by the way, none of them were on psychotropic drugs. That's not, in another study, God himself couldn't get access to the medical record. How did people even, they're all on psychotropic drugs. God himself couldn't get access to the medical records. How do they even claim to know that? But the one thing they all have in common is they've all seen some movie 50 times. They've all played video games until the wee hours of the morning, night after night. They're sleep deprived. They've seen a movie 50 times. The Columbine killers watched the movie Natural Born Killers over 50 times. Prior to the 1980s, it was not possible to watch a movie 50 times. I remember Betamax and VHS in the big battle. You remember that? You're aging yourself. A generation don't understand. If a movie wasn't in the theater, if it wasn't on TV, you couldn't watch it. It wasn't possible to watch some movie 50 times. And Mike talks about how they're all seeking fame. And the media feeds this by giving them that fame. The fame dynamic is overwhelming. The media has this blood on their hands. Here's the Oxford, Michigan school killer. Oxford, Michigan. I want the world to remember me. What's his motive? What's his motive? He flat told you. He wants to get in the news, and he did. I could show you his picture. I could tell you his name. You'd recognize him. That's wrong. You ever remember the New Zealand mosque massacres? This guy live streamed himself in 2 different mosques slaughtering people. The Prime Minister of New Zealand said this man did what he did for notoriety, for fame. We will not give it to him. She said New Zealand will never say this man's name. New Zealand will never show this man's face. New Zealand will not even give him his name. Boom, somebody gets it. They're feeding this stuff, and they've got to commit ever more evil crimes. That's why daycare massacres is what's coming next. School bus massacres. Another elementary school massacre, baby's been done 3 times. Oh, you made a daycare massacre, a school bus massacre. Boom. You'll be like the Columbine killers. You'll be famous. This last killer in Georgia was obsessed with the Columbine killers and obsessed with the fame they were getting. But folks, let me show you another killer. Anybody remember the Parkland, Florida school massacre? Yeah, here's what this guy videotaped ahead of time. This is the Parkland, Florida school massacre. My name is blank. I'm going to be the next school shooter. Look how he embraced that term of 2018. My goal is at least 20 with an AR. Got to set a new record. And it's going to be a big event. And when you see me on the news, you'll know who I am. What's his motive? He flat told you what his motive is. He wants to have fame. He wants to commit these violent acts. So here we are with that Georgia killer. Yeah. Here's the press release on this kid. There's his name. There's his name. And there's his name. And across America, kids will commit these crimes to get in the news day after day after day. 3 different times, his picture's in the news, his name's in the news, and that ain't right. And they have this blood on their hands. But go back to the Parkland killer. Folks, we got 2 good statements on him. The Parkland school killer. Neighbor said he escaped his misery by playing video games 8, 12, 15 hours a day. It was kill, blow it up, kill some more all day. Yeah, in the Miami Herald, buried in Section C on page 3 and never mentioned again. Only one other news agency even mentioned it. South Florida Sun Sentinel. He was an avid video gamer, frequently played as much 15 hours or more. They buried it and never mentioned it. Those are the only two news even mentioned it. The all-consuming, all-pervasive thing in the killer's life. Isn't that important? Isn't it worth mentioning? But they censored it because it points a finger right back at them. And they will not do that. The universal human conspiracy of greed and short-sightedness. Oh, one more thing. Yeah. Let's take a look at this guy. Anybody remember the El Paso Walmart massacre? Now, here's the manifesto. The El Paso Walmart massacre. He said, don't attack heavily guarded areas. When there's people there that can shoot back, they'd rather go somewhere else. To what? To fulfill your super soldier Call of Duty video game fantasy. He flat said what he's doing. I showed that Vice President Pence. He said, why wasn't that the news? Yes, sir. Why wasn't that the news? The all-consuming, all-pervasive thing over and over again is obsession, and it is worldwide. I could go screen after screen, page after page, help you understand it's worldwide. Here we are in Russia. Now, this is September of 22 in Russia. A massacre, 15 in a Russian school. How many of y'all heard about it? Well, it's only happened in America, see, because of our gun laws. You see, no, it's worldwide. But look what they said. This is the 4th school massacre in the region in the past 15 months. One little part of Russia, over 15 months, has had 4 school massacres. Anybody seen the news? Why not? Oh, it's only happened in America, you see. And it's because of our gun laws, see. It's not worldwide. It's only happened in America. Lie. So the next thing coming, I prayed that I'm wrong, daycare massacres. China's had repeated daycare massacres. China succeeded in confiscating all guns. Bad guys gone. We got rid of all the guns. No. Knife massacres in schools. Do a quick search. Chinese daycare attack. 2 dead, 16 injured, stabbing at kindergarten. Knife attack at Chinese daycare. Chinese man gets set for daycare attack. Chinese children killed in an axe attack, and on and on and on. You get rid of all the guns, they'll come to the helpless people and they'll slaughter them with knives. Here we got the Joker Crash killings. Now check this out. On the first anniversary of the death of the actor who played the Joker, the crash is a European word for a daycare, a nursery. On the first anniversary of the death of the actor who played the Joker, with orange hair and a butcher knife, quoting a line from the movie, this guy comes with daycare, kills the daycare worker at the front door. One survived, that's why we know what he said, and hacks and stabs over a dozen babies in the cribs. Now, God forbid that happens here, I pray, but it's coming like a freight train. And the media will turn that person into a celebrity, and when it happens, it's not about what's in their hand. It's about what's in their heart and their head. And ask the question, what's new? What is the new factor? Here we are in Brazil just last year. Brazil had a hatchet attack. Guy with a hatchet in a daycare, 4 dead. How many of y'all heard about that one? Oh, why not? But folks, you ought to be asking yourself, what about me? What about my family? What can we be doing? And ScreenStrong.com, www.ScreenStrong.com. They're doing a whole family detoxing and all kinds of good stuff happening there. They take a medical approach. But one other piece of the equation, folks, one other piece of the equation. We have an internal threat, and we have an external threat. I got a son who just retired after 27 years Spec Ops, 9 combat tours, 3 Bronze Stars. He was there in the invasion of Afghanistan. He was there when it closed down. And for 20 years in Afghanistan, we hunted the Taliban down like dogs. We killed them where we found them. We're in their caves, we're in their homes, killed the Taliban for 20 years, and then we left. No hard feeling, guys. And we left the Taliban in charge. And we left $7 billion of military equipment, an entire nation to train, arm, equip, and deploy from. And what's coming like a freight train is terrorist attacks. And give the current administration credit. They've flat said, since the fall of Afghanistan, the terrorist threat is the highest it's been since before 9/11. So what's the answer? What did Israel discover on October 7th? Because that's what they want to do to us, folks. We need more armed citizens. study what happened October 7th. Case after case after case. 1 or 2 armed people diverted the attack in that part. And Israel's answer is to arm and train more people. Now, folks, here we are in Italy. Remember I said the wheels have come off and it's going over a cliff? Yeah, and the bus is on fire. Here it is in Italy. They say this is school bus massacre. Well, what happened is an immigrant bus driver hijacks a busload of 51 kids with a knife and a can of gas. A can of gas is one of the worst murder tools you could ever find. Soak them all with gas, torch them off. Game over. Now, the Italians were brilliant. One of the kids said he was praying to Allah. He was actually on his cell phone calling their 911. The Italians had a roadblock and fired trucks everywhere. And look at that building. There were cops and first responders busting windows, yanking heads up at windows. Not a single kid died. Badly burned. An American school bus, the windows would be too high. You're going to have to park your vehicle beside the school bus, get on the roof, bust windows, you yank kids out of windows. And the time to think about it is now. I train our nation's largest fire department several times a year for over a decade now. 6 months after this incident, our nation's largest fire department had never heard about it. Do an online search, Italian school bus hijack, boom, it'll come right up. I said, why in the world did our nation's largest, not even know, the head, the chief of the counterterrorism division, the chief of the training division was there. They never heard about it. Just do an online search, Italian school bus hijack, boom, come right up. Why wasn't that the news? Oh, because it only happened in America, you see. It's all about the guns, you see. And we just confiscate all the guns and get rid of all the evil cops. It'll all be better. You begin to get the idea. Folks, this whole mantra, it's the guns, it's the cops, is about them trying desperately to point the finger somewhere else. However bad you think the media is, it's worse. They have this blood on their hands. Now, the universal human conspiracy of greed and self-centered short-sightedness. So, folks, I need you to understand that every one of these murders I told you about is a tragedy of unspeakable magnitude. And I want you to come with me to my hometown of Jonesboro, Arkansas now. We moved to the St. Louis area now. We were stalking the grandchildren. Grandkids moved, we moved, but my hometown of Jonesboro, Arkansas, I was called by my aunt, is that Joe's school? My baby, my little one's in middle school. I went out to my boy's school, and it wasn't his school, it was the other middle school. Never occurred to me we had more than one school in that town that day. I went to the other middle school. I offered my help. They said, thank you. We know who you are. We need you. The lessons of the battlefield and mass critical incident debriefings applied to my own hometown. Now, it's the wee hours of the morning, and we'd done all the prep, and right outside those doors, the blood is still congealing. Were 2 little boys, 11 and 13 years old, gunned down 13 little girls and 2 teachers. Ultimately, 5 would die. It was at that point in time the all-time record juvenile mass murder, and yes, they practiced on video games. We took the media to the arcade. We showed them the point-and-shoot game that they played and played and played. But they were there. We were there in the wee hours of the morning. One of the counselors had been at the emergency room all day long. You got to imagine what it was like in this emergency room. Why did these 2 little boys slaughter our children? They knew who the killers. They knew the killers. They knew who it was right away. Why did these 2 little boys commit this unspeakable act, this crime that has never happened in human history? Mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, aunts and uncles in little sobbing masses trying to figure out, trying to deal with it. Periodically, the doc comes out, pulls aside 2 parents. I'm sorry. We did all we could. I'm sorry. She said the worst of it was this. She said, we've been there quite a while. And there's one lady came in, and she's the only one alone. No husband, no family, no relatives. And she's just sitting there staring off in the distance. This counselor comes up and drops down on one knee and takes her hand. Said, can I help you? She said, they called me. They told me. My little girl's dead. My little girl's dead. She's one of the ones that's killed today. I just want to know how to get my baby back. What I have to do to pick up the body. A police officer there explained that all the ones been murdered, their bodies were sent to the state capitol 100 miles away for autopsies. when they were finished with their baby's body, she could tell them what funeral home to ship the body to. She said, funeral home. Funeral home. We can't afford a funeral. We can't even afford a funeral. That mama didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. But she was infinitely wealthy with her little girl, filled with vast potential. And there was no husband, there were no family, no friend. There was just a mama and her baby. And this morning she hugged her baby, the most precious thing in the universe, alive and warm and vital, and sent her off, trusting us to keep her safe. It's even all that mama wants in all the world is to wrap her baby's body in a blanket and take her home to an empty house. We failed that mom in Jonesboro and Pearl and Paducah and Springfield and Littleton, Edinburgh and Santee and San Diego, Moses Lake, Bethel, Alaska, Chardon, Ohio, and Sandy Hook, and again and again and again. Every single one of these murders, every single one, is a tragedy of that magnitude. And if we truly love our fellow man, if we love our nation, we love our God, we get up and fight. And you believe in who you are. You believe in what you do, because right here, with this group of individuals who spend their money and their time for everything strong and good and true in our nation, you believe in who you are. And you drive on, and you fight. And may God bless you, your family, every endeavor. And God bless America. Thank you.
Talk about, do we have free speech? And we know about the Trusted News Initiative and the conglomeration of media. Would you talk about whether you think we still live in a nation where that's true?
I think if they could, they would censor all of this. But we live in a nation, we live in a world where they can't do that anymore. We have alternative media. We have podcasts. We have online stuff. Educate each other, inform each other, pass the information back and forth to each other. And they no longer have this roadblock. They no longer control all information. And we can defeat them. And this is the time in human history. What was it like in decades past when there was no alternative narrative? What was it like? We don't know. But we know what it's like now. And we know what we can do about it. And it's about being informed and informing other people with their emails and through websites and through podcasts. And go out there and collect the info. Books that the media will not. Glenn Beck's book, New York Times bestseller, not one single review. Nobody. Look, you can attack a New York Times bestseller. What you cannot do is the entire industry refuse to give it any oxygen. That's what we are. Not Fox, not nobody. New York Times bestseller, Glenn Beck's book, the best thing ever done in gun control. Boom. The entire industry will not give it any oxygen. But still, it's a New York Times bestseller. And you can get the book on Amazon and you can understand what's going on and get the full picture. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, okay. All right, I'm going to combine some of your questions so we can get to more of them. But Colonel, do you have you're okay with the?
Yeah,
okay, great.
This coming in clear back there? Are we good?
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so question, is there correlation in the countries that have similar gun laws to ours, to our rate of violence and the reverse of that? And also, could you talk about trends in the states? Which states have more violence, less violence? And what are the characteristics of those places?
Yeah. I don't have a lot of that data. What I do have, son of a gun, Europe, violence has exploded to levels never seen before. For the last 20 years, Europe will not even give the crime data to Interpol. Interpol biannual crime report has been shut down 20 years ago. We got no idea how bad it is, and they won't say. Violent crime data in Europe is censored. We've got no idea how bad it's been for the last 20 years. But you can guarantee that better they'd be saying so. Okay. I thought I had that slide to flip up there. But
that's
all right.
Okay. You can stay down there if you want. I'll if that works for the camera, they'll focus on you, and I'll just be the voice behind the curtain up here. That's all right. I know you like to walk around and talk to people. Talk about, if you would, please, the relationship between sleep deprivation and violence. Sleep deprivation and violence, and how that might be affecting us?
The folks said that one thing that's going on, part of this equation, is a global epidemic of sleep deprivation. Now, sleep deprivation is a key factor in suicide, and worldwide suicides have exploded. One of the best meta-studies on suicide said not only is sleep deprivation a key factor in suicide, it's the most remediable factor. We can't do much about your relationships. We can't do much about your finances, but we can get you a good night's sleep right now. So folks, something to understand here. Sleep deprivation is just like being drunk. It impairs your judgment. 24 hours without sleep and your impaired judgment equal a 0.10 blood alcohol level above legally drunk. And this sleep deprivation, folks, alcohol and suicide have always been related. Look, taking your own life is not a natural act. Every living organism has a powerful drive to self-preservation. To intentionally take your own life, you have to have impaired judgment. Alcohol has always been a key factor in suicide. All the other problems stack up. You put alcohol in the equation, to make a bad decision, you have to rethink it. But the most pervasive form of impaired judgment is this global epidemic of sleep deprivation. Hey, folks, here's parenting 101 for the 21st century. When you send your kid to bed at night, take their cell phone away from them. Teen suicides have exploded. Teenagers, 10, 11, 12-year-old, teenage girls' suicide rate has tripled. And that's just that was pre-pandemic. During the pandemic, they all exploded. So folks, a cop came up to me during a break in one of my presentations. He said, I had one of those teenagers. She was a good girl. She was an A student. She said, Dad, it's embarrassing. You don't have to take my cell phone every night. You can trust me. Family policy, cell phone, the charger, and you go to bed. You can trust me. It's embarrassing. Okay, I trust you. Keep your cell phone. He said, a little while later, she took her life. He said, my little girl took her life. We never knew the hell she was living in until we looked at the text messages on her cell phone. Night after night of ceaseless, relentless bullying. And you can't just ignore that. We're not wired that way. He said it was heart-rending. She was up all night long, night after night, trying to defend herself, trying to find somebody to stand up for her. He said, I immediately understood my little girl was bullied to death. What I didn't understand until now, she was sleep deprived, tortured and tormented to death in front of my eyes. I let it happen. He said, I can't ignore that text message in the middle of the night. How can we expect our kids to? So folks, the suicide sleep deprivation data is overwhelming. And it just keeps on stacking up on us. So just recognize that this sleep deprivation is a key factor in traffic deaths. Folks, I had 3 teenage boys. Now I got teenage grandkids and older. But the number one killer of kids at that point in time was traffic deaths. Well, traffic deaths have exploded. The only reason why other factors are worse is because they're so much worse. Suicide and traffic deaths are the 2 major killers of our kids. Sleep deprivation is a key factor in traffic death explosion. Decade after decade, we brought traffic deaths down. Airbags, seatbelts, medical technology. And now it's exploded worldwide. And folks, opiate epidemic. Sleep deprivation creates chronic pain. Do an online search. Sleep deprivation pain, sleep deprivation suicide, sleep deprivation traffic death. Boom, boom, boom. The data is overwhelming. And folks, sleep hygiene. We have got to sleep in total darkness. Now, folks, the sleep mask, this particular mask has over 85,000 5-star reviews on Amazon. You may not get one more minute of sleep. You get quality sleep if you do it in total, complete darkness. We are designed to sleep in total darkness. And so just understand that we should tell our kids. When my 2nd grade teacher told me cigarettes kill people, I went home and hid my dad's cigarettes. Ever do that? Yeah, my parents convinced us that wasn't a good idea, yeah? But if we told these kids that you got to sleep in total darkness and you need this amount of sleep based on your age, they would do it. As adults, we need at least 7 hours of sleep a night. I hit 9 last night. I had time, slept till my body was ready to get up after 9 hours. We can do this. But this global epidemic of sleep deprivation, folks, we're also seeing it as a key factor in Alzheimer's. Now, that should scare the daylights out of all of us. And so just understand the data is overwhelming. There's a global epidemic of sleep deprivation.
Okay, sir,
Yep.
If you're what 9 hours of sleep does, I want 9 hours.
I'll tell you, people say, how do you have the energy? Vitamin J, Jesus. Right.
Okay, I'm going to shoot out some more questions to you. You are so full of information. Okay, so I'm going to pair these up again. Is there a global effort to disarm our citizens, and what do we do about weaponized government agencies that seem to be curiously growing?
The worst case of election interference we've ever seen is the lawfare against President Trump. And they flat said, this man's evil, this man shouldn't be the president. And that's why they're doing it. And so I tell you what's going to happen. We're going to elect that man, and they will be held accountable for their actions. They said, I'm doing this because an evil man, and he shouldn't be president. They flat said it was in election. And when we start doing discovery, we start looking at their email, we start looking at their cell phones, we'll find out that they were motivated to influence the election, so this man shouldn't be president, and that is a federal felony offense. And we've got to get the right people in charge. And I tell you, the deep state is real. They've got their debt in everywhere. And the way we fight back is this way, right here. And take charge of your school boards. I'm so glad to hear about the school board elections.
There's actually, go Jan Soule and SVACR. There's actually a question about school boards up here. From the audience, what advice would you give to a school board district, a school district board member to change in order to keep our children safe? And may I combine that with a question about how do you send your grandchildren to school with any comfort at all, Colonel?
I put a program in my grandkids' school. It's out of my own pocket. I paid for a program in my grandkids' school. It's called School Guard, SCHOOLGAURD.org. And what it is, all you cops out there, I'll give you a homework assignment. Your homework assignment is download the free app, Hero 911. Now, if you're authorized to carry a gun under LEOSA, retired, reserve, on duty, off duty, you download the free app. Teacher has an app. We activate this in a day. Teacher's got the transmitter, cops got the receiver. Teacher hits that button on an app on their phone, and it goes straight to the cop. We get the off-duty person. We quadruple our coverage. We get the retired person that lives next door. They're going to be there anyway. The Fed that lives across the street, they're going to be there anyway. It's the one that gets here in the first 30 seconds that matters. So there's so much that I teach on school safety. Keep the doors locked. Make it the law. The fire code is usually city county ordinance. You don't have to wait for the state to do it. Take the Texas law and make it city ordinance. Make it the law to keep the doors locked. Put the laminate film, any glass on the door, beside the door. And have somebody in every school that can shoot back. It's one of the best investments. Half the cost of the building goes in a fire code. We can afford to have somebody there that can do that job. But folks, one last thing. The cell phones are a disaster. The best program we have, I've seen it started here in Silicon Valley and other places. They go into school, they put the phone in a pouch. And they cannot access the phone for that whole period. And they're downloading porn, they're playing addictive games. But here's the bad part. It interrupts learning. Bad. But when there's emergency in a school, 100 terrified parents is going to beat the ambulance at that school. And your kid's going to die because we can't get ambulance or cop car within a block of that school. Every kid will immediately text or call mommy and daddy. Mommy and daddy will know before 911. Mommy and daddy live closer than 911. And we've seen this time after time after time. We have gridlock chaos because of those cell phones. And the media knows, often before the cops do. They call the local media, tell them what's going on. And then the cell tower goes down when we need it the most. Because 1,000 kids are calling in, 1,000 parents are calling in. Get those damn phones out of your schools. And it starts by putting them in that pouch. It's available when we leave school and we're afterwards, but lock those things up. And there's a program that does that. It's just, these are the primary, on the top of my head, things that I would tell the school district that we should be doing right now. But most of all, don't teach that woke garbage. Put good people who represent good values and virtues running our school district. Do you even know who's on city council for you? Do you even know who's in the school district? You should know, because that's where you can have the greatest impact. And the Bible tells us over and over again, it's about the city. Over and over again, it's about the city. about blessing the city and fighting the battle in this city. So this is what it's all about, and you're doing it right now and doing it here.
Let me ask you just a couple more quick ones, and then we're going to get you up here, and you can sign some books and meet the folks. Colonel, don't confuse me with a biologist, but I want you to acknowledge the difference we now have with the involvement of women in violence. Recently, there was a terrible crime in Nigeria where women allegedly planned and they killed, I think, 18 people in a coordinated attack. That doesn't seem like the kind of thing my friends and I get together to do. What's going on with the women?
Well, traditionally, violent crime and homicide has been a male activity, and it still is to a large degree. But the video game industry, the movie industry, all these people that are dedicated to stealing your sleep, they are equal opportunity addictors. The head of Netflix said their competitor is sleep. The corporate policy of Netflix is to steal your sleep. The video game will never say, you've been playing this game for 36 hours, turn it off, get some sleep now. Social media, Facebook will never say, you've been online for 24 hours, turn it off, get some sleep. And the head of Netflix has flat said, their competitor is sleep. And so this explosion of sleep deprivation is just like being drunk. And so we're seeing this explosion of violence, but a disproportionate amount, this untapped field of violence enablers and violence digesters. And they're trying hard to push the envelope in that direction, and they've had some success. When we look at the sleep deprivation, we look at the movies, we look at some of the other impact, and then we've got the crazy stuff that's happening with a female killer at the Nashville, Tennessee Covenant School massacre. 6 dead in Nashville Covenant School. And she wanted to be a boy, and the world was evil because he wasn't born a boy. She's going to go kill everybody. And that's where she shot out the glass and crawled in. And just understand, folks, that it's a complex interwoven web. But one of the things we're seeing, if we see the video games played more, violent video games more by girls, if we see the sleep deprivation, if we see the violent movies being tailored and focused on women, then we're going to see an increase in violence in that population. And worldwide, we are seeing some movement. Still, far and away, the most violent crimes are committed by males, but it's exploded everywhere, and there is a bit of a disproportionate increase in female.
Okay. I'm going to invite you right now officially to come back and talk about whether you lose more sleep over toxic masculinity or toxic femininity, but we'll do that in 2025, okay?
All right.
This book kept me up quite a bit. I thought I knew about the violence in video games. Reading the horror of this and how it was mirrored in actual violent events was absolutely shocking. And your work is absolutely spot on, tremendous, and powerful. So let me ask you one last question. How long does the aggression last? When you remove a kid from violence.
What a great question.
How long does it last?
All right, we cover this in the book. The fight or flight hormones flooding through the brain. There's your kid's brain, there's your kid on video games. Catastrophic shutdown of left brain processing. The fight or flight hormones will flush out of the body in 2 or 3 days. You ever take a kid hiking, camping, hunting? You ever get away from TV, movie, and video games for a week? The first 2 days are pure hell. They're going through withdrawal symptoms. On the 3rd day, it's like somebody threw a switch. Church camps nationwide tell me ain't nothing spiritual happened in this camp for the first 2 days. On the 3rd day, it's like somebody threw a switch. So truly, that part of it goes away. However, classical conditioning, it lasts a very long time. Operant conditioning has a half-life of about 6 months. We took to train people to kill in World War II, the individual riflemen left their own devices. The vast majority wouldn't pull the trigger. And we took B.F. Skinner, operant conditioning, and we used that to train them. In flight, and pilots in the flight simulator, cops have to requalify every 6 months. Pilots in the flight simulator generally have to requalify every 6 months because the half-life of that operant conditioning is around 6 months. But the classical conditioning lasts for a lifetime. The sleep deprivation goes away in a day. The fight or flight hormones can be flushed out in 2 days. The operant conditioning has a half-life of about 6 months. Some of the classical conditioning will take a long, long time. So there's a lot of different layers of the equation, but we make a difference in just a couple of days, and that's all in the book as well. Thank you.
That's terrific. The Colonel said, empathy is love with its shoes on. He took his opportunities, turned them into what he calls an honor and an obligation, truly fighting for what he loves. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, for bringing this to us tonight. Take what you've learned, teach one another, pass this along, honor this man's life work by doing something with the information you learned tonight. And we'll put him back in, absolutely. And thank you so much for being with us tonight. Come back and see us.
Thank you for watching our presentation. Please like and subscribe to our channel to get updates on new speakers, and consider joining the Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley. You can do so at our website. If you don't want to join, but want to support the principles of American liberty, you can make a tax-deductible donation via our website. The links are in the description. Thank you again, and stay free.